This is a show that we have decided to call Z.Q.
You already
and
said
I just
that.
realized that your microphone wasn't on.
What?
Yeah, your microphone was not on. I hit the wrong button because we've been using mic 3 for you.
But now mic 3 is destroyed.
But now mic 3 is destroyed, so I ended up using mic 2. So a whole brand new fresh start.
Oh, Lord.
Hey, Quinn, how exhausted are you feeling this week?
Repeating what I said earlier, due to your incompetence.
Wow.
I feel okay this
Wow.
week. I didn't have any tests or anything. So that's nice.
Yeah, I know the feel. Well, and it was the first week back from spring break, so if you had a test, that would have been real rough.
Yeah, I've got like 3 next week, of course, but
at least you have a buffer week to, recover.
Mm-hmm.
This week, we're doing our first, two-parter.
Oh, the second part of our first 2-parter.
The second part of our first two-parter. I guess we kind of had a pseudo two-parter earlier. It was we did a general comics books ones and then a specific comics books ones.
Yeah, I guess that counts.
But this is a proper two-parter. This is a continuation of the last episode.
Yeah, that we decided on midway through last episode.
We decided midway through the last episode because we ended up talking about the Nintendo Switch for a million years.
Speaking of that, do we have any roundup news for the day?
We do. One particular story that I'm really interested in because I like Woody Harrelson and I like Star Wars. Woody Harrelson has been confirmed for the Han Solo standalone film, right?
Yeah.
And for a long time, it was confirmed that he was in a mentor role. And it was confirmed Harrelson would be playing Garrus Shrike, an old EU character who was, basically played Han Solo's mentor in the novels, which, because of all of the Disney Star Wars EU politics, there are a bunch of reasons why that's uncommon or, unlikely or whatever. It was pseudo confirmed. Mm-hmm. And word is just recently breaking yesterday that he will not be playing Garrus Shrike from the old EU. Mm-hmm. Harrelson was on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and when asked about his role in the film, he said, quote, "I play a guy named Beckett who's kind of a criminal and a mentor to Han. That's all I can say," end quote. Which, I'm getting this from the Nerdist, and, their commentary is well, it's not a very Star Wars name now, is it?
I mean, it sort of is. There's a tradition of people with sort of normal names. They're just not common.
I mean, you have Luke and Owen and Ben, Beckett could be his first name, which would be kind of out there. And
it would be out there, but
Star Wars-y.
It would work as a last name. There are more normal last names than normal first names in Star Wars.
There definitely are, but I think particularly looking at The Force Awakens and Rogue One, we had no normal names. Well, normal names.
Yeah.
even the normal-ish ones, like Jin, were not spelled the way we would expect them.
That's fair.
Which, I'm all for. I think one of the easiest ways to give your universe a coherent feel is through naming conventions. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty okay with them stepping it up, which admittedly is a bit of a break from the original trilogy, because you had Luke and Ben and Owen, but you also had Han Solo and Beru, like you said, and Leia Organa. So
yeah, which is definitely space namier.
Yeah, but I like it, especially when you look at the new trilogy, which all we have is Force Awakens thus far. Mm-hmm. I guess you have Finn, which is a pretty normal name.
Yeah, but it's a condensing of a serial number.
Yeah.
It's not a given name.
Yeah, but then you have Rey, Poe Dameron, and
Poe is a normal enough name.
Yeah. My personal favorite though is Snap Wexley.
Of course it is.
He's probably one of it's a sort of a throwaway line in The Force Awakens, but like the First Order is able to figure out where the Resistance base is because they tracked like Snap's reconnaissance mission.
Huh.
He like went to do recon on Starkiller and came back and apparently did not do an evasive maneuver hard enough. And that's why they start a fire in their laser at the Illyrian system. Illyrian? No. That's
Ilenian?
Ilenian. Lyrium is from the Dragon Age games.
Yes. It's like the weird corruption crystal, or it can be.
Yeah.
I think it fuels magic.
It's also like a drug plant. I don't know. There's a whole lot going on in those games.
Yeah, I've only actually played Origins and like the first half of Inquisition, so I don't actually know enough to comment.
Yeah. The big thing that I remember is that Cullen is like the weird sweaty advisor, like the weird sweaty jock advisor, is part of. There's like a whole backstory of him with this weird drug plant crystal thing.
Yeah.
It's
so returning to the Star Wars thing.
Returning to those things we were talking about,
because I have some thoughts on this. Mm-hmm. So I had seen where people were like, "Oh, he's probably going to be Shrike."
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little disappointed in that, not because they're bringing EU stuff back, because I'm typically in favor of that. But I was really hoping he would be like Tiber Zahn, because I think he could play that role pretty well. And Tiber Zahn is one of my favorite EU characters.
Who is Tiber Zahn?
He's a crime boss in the... Like, he's more of an established crime boss in the, original trilogy era. But he's like an older-ish guy at that point, so he would be, around for young Han Solo.
Mm-hmm.
And he is kind of a rival to like Prince Xizor and like the just starting out Talon Card, and like he's confirmed to have had dealings with Han before, but there's also like entanglements with like Dathomir, and he's really cool. He has like a grenade shotgun.
Dathomir being the planet that Darth Maul is from, where half of the population are the men who are warriors, and the other half are all witches. Physically segregated onto the two sides of this planet.
Yeah, well, Dathomir wasn't like that in the old EU.
I know, but the Clone Wars is the canon that we have now.
I know.
And also, like, let's be real, it's one of my favorite planets in the Star Wars universe.
But it used to be like an old Sith stronghold that like the Dathomir witches were on, but not native to, and like it had rancors, and there was like an Imperial prison. It was a cool thing, and Darth Maul wasn't involved at all because he was dead because he got cut in half and fell down a giant pit.
But Quinn, you can survive anything if you can build yourself a set of garbage spider legs fast enough.
Are we assuming he built them on the way down the giant pit?
Yep, just as he's falling, just using the Force, and it's like, all right, this is mine. Because it wasn't just a pit, it was like a maintenance tunnel or something.
I think he was falling into like a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, plenty of time along the way. Well, I mean, Clone Wars retcons it into it's a garbage chute, which why you have a big like.
Why would they have all those force fields around it?
I don't know.
And why not a railing? Which that holds up regardless of what it is, but
yeah, I mean, having like your garbage chute in the middle of the floor surrounded by force fields. But that's what it is, because he gets picked up by like space trashmen and dumped on the space trash planet. God bless the Clone Wars. All right, so we do actually have another weekly roundup story.
Oh dear.
And this is about the Power Rangers movie.
All right.
Again from Nerdist, and it's a surprisingly positive review. So we talked a lot about how like we thought it would be a good, like a decent, 2 hours of sit there and watch giant things punch other giant things. Mm-hmm. It actually apparently hews a lot closer to like The Breakfast Club than initially expected.
Huh.
Like it's the particular takeaway quote from this review truth be told, the movie is a good deal less interested in these kids' discovery of their newfound abilities, heavily armored suits, and questionably sentient mechanical animal vehicles than it is in their discovery of each other. And that, for the most part, is why it works. Which, I mean, now that I think about it, the Power Rangers is kind of just Big Dumb Punchy Breakfast Club.
Yeah, I mean, that's not wrong.
I don't know.
It's never been like a subdued, contemplative Punchy Breakfast Club, but, you know, I guess we'll see. I feel like I'm going to see that movie at some point.
Yeah, same.
I don't think I'm going to pay money for it because I have no money, but...
Yeah.
You know, when it's like for rent somewhere for cheaper.
Yeah, that's fair. Or when, you know, I go home for summer and make my mother take me. Because there are like a whole bunch of like college theaters back home, and they get movies late, just like we do. And you can usually get them for pretty cheap. But yeah, that's something I kind of expected, actually. Like, and another point that this article, again, it's Nerdist's review of the Power Rangers movie. So if you're interested, just nerdist.com. I don't know. I'm not particularly surprised that it hews a lot closer to the Breakfast Club, because you've seen that kind of like character-heavy ensemble movie do really well. Well, I'll say be really popular recently, variably doing really, really well, Rogue One, or doing not good, Suicide Squad. I was excited for the movie anyway. I was probably going to go see it anyway. But this sort of glowing, if unexpected review, I wouldn't say glowing. This very positive, if unexpected review. Like, yeah, it's a little bit of a zag from what we expected, but...
Well, I'm on board with it because what I was expecting wasn't all that great.
Yeah, and like they have Elizabeth Banks playing the main villain, which is really like I have no doubt in her acting abilities.
Yeah.
But she's predominantly comedic. Like, she directed Pitch Perfect 2. She was in Pitch Perfect 1. Well, she was actually in both of them. But it's like that they're, you know, talking about her character is Rita Repulsa.
From, like, the original Power Rangers? Was she, like, the first Power Rangers villain?
I think she was a side character in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Okay.
Because Ivan was the main bad guy, but he had, like, a gaggle of cronies.
But she was, like, the first episode or something, right?
I'm talking about the movie, so I couldn't tell you.
A show.
Yeah, I know, but like all of my childhood kind of blends into like one long memory of watching Power Rangers in like various different colors, and the only things that really stand out are Mighty Morphin, Turbo,
Okay.
and the one episode of one of the series where one of the bad guys just pulls a bone out of his shin to use as a sword.
All right.
That happens. And it's like in the aftermath plot of like losing the Red Ranger, like the Red Ranger straight up died to this guy. And they're like now still trying to fight him without the Red Ranger, and with him also being like the most significant villain they've ever faced. And he straight up pulls a bone sword out of his leg.
Man, SPD must have been like the tamest of the Power Rangers, because I don't remember anything like that.
Yeah, I think it was like, this was whatever series came before SPD. But yeah, it was, or maybe it was 2 before SPD, because I think the Samurai one was right before SPD. Anyway, maybe we'll have an entire episode on Power Rangers one day.
I will be so unequipped for that. I've seen one series.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've seen a couple, but also we can just talk about memes, because, and we'll probably wait until like after this movie comes out to do it.
Yeah.
And I'll at least go see it.
I mean, we're not going to be able to compete with like Linkara doing like the history of Power Rangers thing with his like expert level Power Rangers knowledge.
Can we compete with anyone ever, Quinn?
No.
No, not with the level of research we don't put into this. All right, that is our weekly roundup. We are going to go to a quick music break. And then when we come back, as mentioned, we will be talking about I'm going to say favorite-ish. So like favorite with an asterisk science fiction movies. Because I'm going to bring up one that I hate.
This will be a surprise to me too, folks.
Yeah, because I just decided that I want to do it. All right. We will be back shortly. we're back. I remembered to turn your mic on this
I was
time.
about to ask and make sure.
Well, you can see the board.
I can, but I don't trust you.
You're sitting close to it, so you can see that the big red light is on. Yeah, so we're talking about my
favorite, like, qualified sci-fi movies.
Yes. You know what 3 of the 4 are.
Yeah, the 3 that we discussed previously.
And then there's my secret mystery zag. Where do you want to start?
I guess let's start with the one I've seen the most recently.
Okay.
So that would be The Martian.
The Martian. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, The Martian is a movie that came out a few years ago starring Matt Damon as Mark Watney, an astronaut on the fourth manned mission to Mars, who, because of a, sort of tragic mishap, gets left behind, like presumed dead on Mars, and then is not dead.
And it's him trying to survive and get back to Earth, basically.
Yeah, it's basically him setting about growing a bunch of potatoes, and
that happens.
surviving on Mars for, like, I think a year almost. Like, almost a full year.
I think it might have been a little more than that. Didn't he spend, like, almost a full year just in the, like, wheelie-dealy?
No, he spent a couple months.
Okay.
But yeah, it's I think from his first, like, from Earth to Earth contact, it's over a year that he is in space. And I think just over a year just on the surface of Mars. But yeah, it's him, like, setting about surviving, growing an inordinate amount of potatoes, like, and it's really, really good.
It's good, and it's very, like, well-researched science.
Yeah, so the guy who wrote it, Andy Weir, like, clearly did his research. And in the book, at least, there's a lot of Mark Watney sort of walking through the math, because it's basically written in the format, or at least part of it is written in the format of a journal that he's keeping in order to, like, stay sane / record his last thoughts on Mars. In the movie, they adapt that to he's basically just making these video logs of his time there. And so there's a lot of good science, and it's a very good, like, survival adventure story.
Yeah, and it's kind of, unique to me anyway, in that it was a survival adventure story that felt 95% plausible.
Yeah, it takes place in the not too distant future when we have, are doing manned missions to Mars like we were doing to the moon back, with the Apollo missions. And it feels very plausible, very feasible, but, like, has just that slight edge of, like, pushing it a little too far.
He does at one point, like,
fly around like Iron Man.
Like Iron Man.
And I think a big part of that is just that space is so weird.
Yeah.
Like, just out of the gate, space is just so weird that it's like, yeah, this might as well happen in space. But so we mentioned this on our last episode, and I believe we mentioned it earlier. The movies I have for us this week are more speculative fiction geared. And The Martian may actually have been a bad one to start off with because it's qualified speculative fiction, I'll say. The book is predominantly this sort of survival adventure with sort of moments of speculative fiction thrown in.
Yeah, but it's mostly just a...
how to survive on Mars.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movie, there are a couple of scenes they add and a couple of scenes that are in the book that they expand that really delve a lot more into the speculative nature of it. There's one of the plot points is that they're trying to resupply Mark Watney, and their rocket booster, NASA's rocket booster, fails. And the Chinese Space Agency has one, but it's, like, been kept secret because it's going to be used to launch a spy satellite.
Yeah, and it's got some kind of space race, like, Cold War-y overtones.
Yeah, and there's this, whole decision of basically, like, the president and the vice president of the Chinese Space Agency basically lock themselves in their office and, like, try to figure out what they're going to do. And, the whole message is, like, well, how much faith do we want to put in Watney? How much are we willing to look at sort of the international relations implications of this? And it deals with that very well. And then when they decide to, save Watney, there's some comment they make about we've done so much to save this man, but how much have we, lost in science or whatever. And ultimately, the book, and to a much greater extent, the movie, is sort of an exploration of it's like there's some philosophy of science going on, more so in the what is the value of science and what is the value of space exploration kind of thing. But there's also, some ethical themes, I guess is the better way to say that, within the movie. And in the movie, it's really sort of culminated in this scene, because the book ends once Mark Watney gets back on the spaceship to go home to Earth. The movie ends once Mark Watney is back on Earth, and there's sort of this scene where you're going through all the astronauts who are on this mission with him, watching the launch of the next manned mission to Mars. And you're also watching him basically give a lecture at NASA, because now he works for NASA as a how to do a survival in space instructor, where he really talks about the get up and go of science and how if you're not motivated, you will die. And it's a very interesting take on that, and I think it really deals with these sort of science, big question mark questions, and it's just really well made.
It's a very well made survival narrative. I would say it addresses it addresses that those questions exist. I don't know that it necessarily has answers of its own.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a let's start talking about these things before we start sending people to Mars. And it's certainly kind of had ripples in the science fiction community. I was on the internet the other day and I saw something that was talking about when we finally get proper intergalactic travel, and how humans are absurdly hardy, and this story in particular talked about something called the Watney Protocol, in which all ships are required to carry live soil and plant samples in the event that they crash land and there is surviving crew, so that they can grow and feed themselves from these food things, which I thought was really cool. And it's definitely let us address these questions before we get too much further into, space, basically.
Yeah. Which I do want to bring up my immediate thought while watching the movie the first time, when the Chinese save him, basically.
Yep.
Which was, it's a prequel to Firefly now.
Yeah, I guess it could be a prequel to Firefly.
You could definitely set this in that universe.
You could. And
this is the start of the Sino-American alliance that eventually
becomes Earth
and colonizes another star system.
Never thought about that, but yeah, you totally could.
Mm-hmm.
All right, before we get too bogged down thinking about stealth prequels to Firefly,
I'm not going to talk about Firefly anymore. We'll do a whole episode on that later.
We will not do a whole episode on Firefly.
Why not?
It makes me too sad.
But it's my favorite show.
But it makes me too sad.
Fine. All right, go ahead.
So my next movie, and I've been told that this is a very controversial opinion by you. Just the idea that this is a good movie is apparently an idea that the internet hates.
I don't know that the internet hates it. I think the internet's very divided on it in a way that it's not for, say, The Martian and Gattaca.
That's fair. So Michael Bay's The Island.
Which the Michael Bay involvement is, I think, the source of most of the controversy.
Yeah, but it's before Michael Bay got weird. It is...
Dude was always kind of weird.
But it's pre-Transformers Michael Bay. It takes place mostly indoors, so you don't have these huge Transformer-esque explosion constantly fight scenes, and the wide angle shots and the shaky cam and the fast cuts where they are actually used well, as they should be, rather than as bad fight scene cliches. And so the basic premise is that there's this community living in what they believe to be a post-apocalyptic refuge tower. They're safe from whatever this disease out there is, and occasionally new survivors get brought in, and every now and then there's a lottery that randomly takes people out to the island, which is like the paradise. Like, this is part of the earth that never got infected and never will. We can make it safe, and we can make you safe there. And so they have a lottery to like take people out there, or that's what they think.
Dun dun dun.
Because, and I mean, I guess this is a spoiler, so if you're sensitive, look away with your ears. But it's also just the plot of the movie. Like, if it happens in the first 30 minutes, it's not a spoiler. It turns out that this is actually like a clone farm.
Yeah, for like organ harvesting, right?
There are a couple of different things that they use them for.
Okay. I haven't actually seen this one.
It is a clone farm, and all the clones of all of these, super rich and super famous people are down there, and the, survivors that they bring in are really just new clones that have, been born. People that win the lottery and are taken out are actually just people who it's time to harvest. And, then they get like exterminated. There's also like pregnancy is a big thing. Like, if a celebrity wants to have a baby but doesn't want to carry it themselves, they can have a clone and just have them carry their child. And giving birth is like automatically going to the island within the, survival apocalypse tower. But Ewan McGregor plays the main character, and his clone like escapes into the private hospital at the top of this, what is actually an underground like abandoned missile silo. And he like escapes and is like, they lied to me. And then love interest Scarlett Johansson's clone gets called up for the lottery to go to the island. And Ewan McGregor's character is like, no, we must flee. And they escape. And there's a hover car chase scene.
Does it contain base explosions?
It contains a couple of explosions. I will not say they are Michael Bay explosions.
Okay.
That's the thing. So the hover car chase scene is, and there's another scene where, because Steve Buscemi is one, so he's one of the people from the outside who like works in the clone farm. And he is actually like a friend to Ewan McGregor's character, and they get along. And eventually, like, when Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson escape, they go to Steve Buscemi for help. And a big part of like this big emotional moment is actually like Steve Buscemi gets killed, and you see him fall in like glorious slow motion from like the top floor of a train station, which I never thought that like the death of a character played by Steve Buscemi would make me cry. But like sitting in AP Bio, because after the AP test, we just watched science fiction movies in that class, and I actually like teared up a little bit. But my point is, then the reason I bring this movie up is that it's a really good treatment of personhood questions. And when we get to cloning, how will we handle it? And, so on. And, within the fiction of the movie, the law is that your clones can never reach sentience. Like, if they're meant to be used for organ harvesting or anything, you basically grow them, harvest the organs, and then like terminate the fetus, the adult fetus thing, because they grow to adulthood in like, the span of a year. The people who run this particular clone farm don't do that because it's too expensive. Sean Bean actually is the director bad guy.
How quickly does he die?
That's the climax of the movie.
Oh, okay.
And I actually think, if I remember correctly, he dies off screen.
That's longer than he normally lasts.
Yeah, but he dies towards the end because, like I said, he's the main bad guy. But it's a really good treatment of like personhood and identity things, because despite the fact that Ewan McGregor is a clone of this guy who he actually meets the person he's a clone of.
Is the person he's a clone of like Ewan McGregor?
Yeah, no. So it's not just live action Ewan McGregor and the clone of Ewan McGregor. It's the character and the character he's cloned from, but they are both played by Ewan McGregor.
Well, see, I was hoping that it was like actual clones of actual celebrities.
No, I was too a little bit, but then I realized like, Ewan McGregor's character, the one that isn't a clone, is just a terrible person. And also that would mean that Scarlett Johansson just died during the plot of this movie.
Well, like, what was that? It was one of the like Cornetto trilogy sort of things they did, or maybe it wasn't that. Maybe It was some Into the World movie that was out a couple years ago that had a whole bunch of actors playing themselves in a sci-fi situation.
Yeah, I think I know. Like This Is the End.
Yeah, because there was like World's End and This Is the End or something like came out.
World's End was like Simon Pegg.
Yeah, so that would be the Cornetto trilogy.
Yeah.
Was it not that
It
one?
was not that one.
Okay.
It was This Is the End. Was apparently just terrible. Like my brother and my mom saw it together, and not only was it like super uncomfortable for the two of them to watch together, it was also just apparently bad. But yeah, that does have a bunch of celebrities. Like Emma Watson is in it, just playing Emma Watson, which is always something that's like interesting to do, but it's ideally well done, and this just wasn't. But yeah, no, it's not just them. It's characters, but like compelling and well done characters. So I like it. And also they, like I said, a really good treatment of personhood. And it's like, well, at what point does a person become a person? And like, these people have their own identities, even if they're cloned from these other people. So how does that, like, how do they become, you know, unique humans? And it's just really good. It is a really good movie. And I mean, like, you know, the color coding is weird. And there are some Michael Bay-esque filmmaking elements, but I would say that this is what happened. Like, this is one of those movies that set Michael Bay down that path where it's like he did a couple of movies heavily featuring, you know, explosions, shaky cam, weird color palettes, stuff like that, and then started to think, I really like doing this. This is good filmmaking. These are like well-used filmmaking tools, and then just spiraled. And just started relying only on those for the quality of his movies. Yeah, like when I learned that it was Michael Bay, I was like, huh.
Yeah, I didn't quite believe that either, because I had heard some people talking about it like, oh, it's this really good like speculative fiction thing. And some people were like, oh, it's this Michael Bay explosion disaster.
And I mean, like, there are like...
So it was confusing for me.
Yeah, there are like, you can definitely... Once you learn it was made by Michael Bay, like I saw it and then learned it was made by Michael Bay, and I was like, huh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But it was good, which is confusing. But yeah, it definitely is a good approach to that. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about my other two movies. And I guess we'll start with my mystery favorite-ish asterisk heavily qualified movie. We'll be right back. Quinn, we are back, and we are going to talk about, relatively quickly, yes, my last two movies.
Right, so you said starting with the mystery zag, which I wasn't expecting.
Starting with the mystery zag, because I want to end on a high note.
Okay.
You've heard me talk about this movie.
I've heard you talk about a lot of movies, so that doesn't help me.
As early as this morning, actually. It's one of those movies that's one of those things that's so good until it's not.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
The movie I'm talking about is Uncanny. It is a speculative science fiction animatronic cyborg story that's on Netflix, and I heartily recommend that you don't waste your time on it.
So it's a bit of a weird tack for favorite movies, but
I did say favorite-ish because for the first 80 minutes, it is one of my favorite science fiction movies ever, and then the last 30 minutes ruin it.
Explain.
So the plot of Uncanny is that there is a scientist who graduated like top of his class at MIT and was immediately scooped up by like this, like a really skeezy Elon Musk type. So more like a Henry Ford type. Like if Henry Ford were in the modern day, it would be this character who's played by Rainn Wilson, by the way. Yeah, Dwight from The Office, which makes it just bizarre. It's just weird. Yeah, it makes it really hard to take him seriously as a villain, actually, because he's kind of just like sitting behind a desk being greasy. He's also in the movie for about 5 minutes total. But the plot is this scientist gets scooped up and like put into isolation with like complete, basically limitless funding for whatever he wants to do. And what he wants to do is build a cyborg. And so like the opening scene is these two guys playing chess in an apartment, and then it turns out that one of them is a cyborg, and like a reporter comes to visit for like a week to do like an expose, and there's a love triangle, and you get the impression that the character who we think is a cyborg. And I'm not going to worry about spoilers here because I heartily recommend you don't watch this movie. The character we think is a cyborg is basically going through what we would identify as like a human sexual awakening, because this is like the first time he's interacted with anyone except for the man he views as his father.
Right. Okay.
And so they're like, he's going through basically this sexual awakening and like figuring it out. And then the character we think is the human and the reporter sleep together. And up until then, it is a poignant and well done, if unsettling, story about the responsibility that we as humans will have to artificial intelligence once we create them.
Okay.
It's like really good, really interesting, raises a lot of questions. And it's sort of where I get my theory of like raising AI, which we'll probably talk about later, but basically treating an artificial intelligence as you would like a growing child in order to give them those sort of like moral and ethical lessons that we always deal with when we deal with the AI.
Right.
And then it gets bad.
Okay.
Because it turns out that the person we thought was a human all along was actually the robot, and the person we thought was a robot all along was actually the human, which does not make a lick of sense.
All right.
There's a scene where, there are just scenes where the person we think is the robot is doing things with no other character in the room. The only people in this room are the robot and the audience. And the character does things that don't make any sense if he's actually a human.
He does like robot. Does he like plug himself in? What robot things does he do?
And so, being aware of the fact that we're saying this on radio, I'm trying not to anger our FCC overlords. Like, as he's going through his sexual awakening, like his first question is basically, "What is sex?" And so basically just Googles that, and it's like that's something that doesn't make sense if he's a person,
Yeah, that's fair.
which he is apparently.
Unless he grew up in like the South.
But he went to MIT.
Yeah.
He's like post MIT at this point. Yeah, it's really bad. And it like after that point, it just gets violent. And you find out that the person you thought was a robot is just like this really creepy voyeuristic human. And then it also turns out that the message this movie was trying to send was one about like NSA surveillance. And they're trying to build a lifelike android for basically like pillow talk surveillance.
That's okay. That's a weird one.
Which is weird. And it's like, if you're going to watch this, watch like the first 80 minutes of it and then turn it off.
Okay.
But also just don't watch it.
That's fair. So moving on briefly to your final good one.
My final good one.
Which is one I have seen.
Which is one you have seen.
Bio, so.
And it's like, it's just a really good movie. Like I just genuinely very much enjoy this movie and like heartily recommend it to anyone. And part of that is because it has, a good cast. Uma Thurman's in it. Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
Jude Law, a relatively young Jude Law is in it.
Oh, yeah. He was.
And basically, it's a movie that came out like late 80s, early 90s, I believe. Possibly even earlier than that.
I feel like it was more recent than that. I don't know, though.
No, because it's set... It's I think it's late 80s.
Okay.
I will double check and probably put that in the show notes. Or you'll just Google it right now.
Well, I was doing it stealthily. Go ahead, though.
It's fine.
1997.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I guess the internet is only like 28 years old.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, gosh. Oh, God. I'm having like a whole like midlife crisis already. Like the internet is only like 8 years older than I am. I've grown up with the internet my entire life. How fast has technology changed? But my point is...
Stay on target.
So genetic engineering has progressed to a point where like all babies are basically designer babies, and the last sort of crop of humans who are born conceived naturally basically are viewed as second-class citizens. Particularly the main character played by Ethan Hawke. He has like a 99% chance or a 90% chance of like a heart condition. That would be, catastrophic if you tried to, say, launch him into space, which is unfortunate because his dream is going to space.
And then, the plot is basically he lies about that
Yeah,
in a
so
convoluted fashion.
he assumes the identity of Jude Law's character, who was a designer baby and had an accident to where he was paralyzed, but like that didn't quite make it into the medical records because of reasons. And so Ethan Hawke is able to take over his identity, and they're able to basically fake his way into getting the job he wants, the life he wants, under this other man's identity. And then there's a murder at his job, which is like Gattaca Space Industries. The FBI comes in to investigate, and it turns out like the FBI investigator is his brother. And like the one person who could very easily be like, you're not who you say you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's like this whole plot about like genetic engineering and like how do we human basically, and how do we prevent discrimination, and you know it has implications into other forms of discrimination. And it's a really well done movie, and part of the reason I like it is because it addresses a topic very well.
It does,
right?
yeah.
And it addresses a topic very well that the human race kind of seemed to handle pretty well, at least for a time.
Yeah, we'll see.
So yeah, sort of at the same time that this whole craze was happening and the movie came out and genetic engineering really became this big thing that the public had to deal with.
Yeah, because like late 90s, that was like Dolly and everything.
Yep. And there was a moratorium imposed on human genetic engineering and human cloning and that kind of stuff, which I think is still generally in place. It might have been lifted, but I think it's still in place. But it's speculative fiction about a topic that the human race actually seemed to respond to correctly.
Yeah.
It was like there was this kind of like panic and uncertainty, and things like Gattaca and things have with the same message as Gattaca came out and were like, hey, maybe we should reconsider this. And then the human race was like, yeah, you know, we should, and then did. And so I guess my point is it's good speculative fiction from the past that really you can kind of see the implications today. And I think that's really cool as a historical artifact. And then it's also just a really good movie.
It is.
It also is one of those that just kind of restores your faith in humanity, because there are the people throughout it who are just good people. And I mean, the good people, of course, are the ones that are making the decisions that the director wants you to make, right? And, you know, in that way, it's a very well-written piece of, like, moral fiction, I guess. But yeah, it's a really well-done movie. It's really interesting, deals with its subject matter very well.
And, like, it's not dealing with light subject matter, but it's not, like, hugely depressing dystopia in the way that, like, a lot of speculative fiction is.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It is very heavy subject matter.
It's not like a heavy oppressive film.
Yeah, it like I watch that movie for like a good time with my friends on the weekend sometimes. It's enjoyable. It's not just a movie like a thinker. It's a fun movie to watch.
Yeah.
So those are my movies. The three I highly recommend: The Martian, The Island, and Gattaca. I almost said The Gattaca, which is something that I've been doing like all week in preparation for this show.
No. Well, I think you've avoided it thus far.
I have, but yeah, like The Martian, The Island, Gattaca. And then the one I do not at all recommend,
Uncanny.
but yes, Uncanny. But it was worth talking about for the sake of just getting it out there and talking about when speculative fiction goes bad, I think. So that is it. That's the second part of our first proper two-parter.
Yeah. So last time it was Jurassic Park, Pacific Rim, Evolution, and the good cut of I Am Legend.
The good cut of I Am Legend, which something that I Am Legend and Uncanny reminds me of, we might have to have an episode where we just talk about things that are really good
Until
they're not. And then they're just spectacularly bad.
Because we already have two.
We already have two, and that's, you know, half a show. More than half a show if we actually stick to our time schedule. All right. That is us for this week. You can find us on Tumblr at z.qradio.tumblr.com, all spelled out. You can find us on YouTube.
Oh, yes.
We are z.qradio, capital Z, period, capital Q, space, radio. If you're friends with me on Facebook, you can just go there, and I always post links. We have show notes on our Tumblr. If you're interested in reaching out to us, probably doing it through the Tumblr is the best bet,
that
or
would be
our
the-
email address, which is, again, just z.qradio at gmail.com. I have been Zero.
I continue to be Quinn. That never stops.
This has been a show that we have decided to call Z.Q, and until next week, go enjoy something.